It's 5 after 7. We'll get going with Charles Bogart. And it's all yours, Charles.
All mine.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for having me. Let me do one thing here. And I assume you good people can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. The Louisville Nashville Railroad and the Kentucky Distillery Industry. When one thinks of the Louisville Nashville Railroad in Kentucky, one generally thinks of coal, iron, and timber. We at one time was the 6th largest producer of iron ore in the United States. We're at one time in the top 5 of the timber producers. And of course, we were always number 1 and 2 with West Virginia production coal. But distilleries need to be added to this list. In 1890, a bushel of corn was worth 50 cents. A gallon of whiskey was worth $2. A bushel of corn makes 4 gallons of whiskey. Can you do the math in your head? Why you're producing whiskey? We're talking whiskey, we're not talking bourbon. Whiskey is run off immediately. Bourbon's got to age for 4 years at a minimum. Now, there's 4 ages of distilleries in Kentucky. We're not talking federal or state taxes. We're talking non-tax things. 1792 to 1897, there was no regulation. You made whatever you wanted to make. You put whatever you wanted to make in it to make it hot, colder, sweeter, sour, darker, lighter. You put your chewing tobacco in if you wanted to. You put hot pepper in. Nobody cared. In 1897, they came out and said what whiskey was, what bourbon was, what gin was, what vodka was, what beer was, alcoholic beverages, and the content that was in it. So this is the first regulation period. Then 20 to 33, prohibition, can't do any of that stuff, except with a few exceptions. Then 30 to 26, which is the second period of regulations. Once again, we're not talking taxes, we're talking regulating what goes into and what cannot go into various forms of spirits. Spirits are alcohol you can drink. Non-spirits is alcohol you cannot drink. Non-spirits gets poison put in it per U.S. government rules. Okay, tax and federal from the first drop until the bottle is sold to wholesaler. Okay, we're going to pause a second. I don't understand the craft bourbon industry in Kentucky. And we're going to pick on your president, who I don't know who he or she is. You decide to go in the bourbon industry. It is going to cost you $1 million plus to get your distillery set up and so forth and so on. You're paying some salaries. Then you got to get your corn, barley, and everything and bring it in. Then you got to distill it. Then you got to put it in a barrel. And when that first drop goes in the barrel, drip, you're starting to pay tax. And you're going to pay tax for 4 years at a minimum to the feds, to the state, and to the locals before you can tap that barrel and start selling it as bourbon. It is now 4 years and you've tapped that barrel. And those gentlemen and lady around you, you poured them all a sample of that bourbon. And they're going to take a sip of it. And you're hoping they're going to say it's the nectar of the gods and not its hog wallow. Even if they say it's nectar of the gods, now you got to find a wholesaler who will take it on and carry it to the retailers. And the wholesaler has to go to the retailer and find some shelf space. You see the problems with it? Okay, distilleries were an important source of revenue for the L&N. Not only did the cars come in loaded, they went out loaded. Coal, they went up unloaded, got loaded, and came back. Timber went up loaded, came back loaded. Iron ore went up unloaded, came back loaded. With distilleries, they get both loads going in and loads going out. Here it is, I'm mentioning again, incoming and outgoing shipments. Incoming goods coming into the distillery, coal. They're producing their own par, lumber for making the cases and the casks, bottles and cans, barrels, their grains, corn, wheat, and rye, barley and hops, labels, cases. All this has to come in so that you can ship some goods out. Bourbon must contain 15% corn and age for 4 years. It can have all the way up to 99% corn, but it's got to have 51% corn. It's got to be aged for 4 years in an American oak barrel that's been charred. That barrel can only be used one time. Now, the story about bourbon is folktale. In Bourbon County, Kentucky, some Baptist preacher made his whiskey, and he was going to put it in a barrel, and the barrel would contain pickles. So he burnt the inside of the barrel to get rid of the odor of the pickles. He loaded the barrel with his whiskey. He put it in a wagon, and it got jounced and bounced around, taken up to Limestone, now Maysville, Kentucky, where it was loaded aboard a keelboat and floated down the Ohio River and the Mississippi to New Orleans, going through weather changes, temperature changes, bounced and barreled around, and so forth on. In New Orleans, it sits for a while, gets loaded upon a ship, goes up and around up to New York, where it's all floated. Once going through temperature changes, being bounced around, loaded onto a wagon, taken over to Abe's tavern, where the barrel is open and poured, and you take a sip of it and say, man, this is good stuff. Because most spirits are consumed within 4 to 6 days of it being made. It's raw stuff you drink. This stuff is sat, it is aged, it has been bounced around, it has absorbed the sweetness out of the barrel. And they said, where'd this stuff come from? And they said, Bourbon County, Kentucky. Bourbon County at that time was everything east of I-75, Kentucky. That's how bourbon supposedly got its name. Okay. Outgoing goods from the distillery. Slop. That's your barley and your oats and everything. It's been used, but it's still good. It's good feed. You got bottled whiskey, rye, bourbon, and gin and vodka going out. You got barrels of whiskey, rye, bourbon, and gin and vodka going out. You got bottles and cans. That's all spirits up there. You got bottles and cans of alcohol. No, it's not drinkable. Some of it is, maybe, but basically it's poison. Used barrels. There's a big market for bourbon barrels. You may come across beer made in used barrels, wine made in used barrels, various spirits made in, it's a selling point. It was made in used barrels. And corn oil, left over from the corn that was used. The typical cars at a distillery. Hey, this is for you modeler guys. Listen up. Boxcars, hoppers, gondola, and tank. Pre-1950. After 1950, covered hoppers. This is the distilling process. Very simple. Comes in, goes to the cooker, ferments, goes through the still, where the various levels of alcohol is pulled out. It's cooled, put in the barrel for storage for 4 years, put in the bottle, shipped out, and you guys drink it. You guys, I'm from Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati. Guys is male and female where I came from. Okay, guys. Here's a diagram of a distillery. If you notice up here in the upper left, we got a boxcar in, and it's all floating grain into this, and the grain is going across here through all the various processing things. Down here, we got a boxcar coming in, and it's all floating casks, bottles, barrels, and all kind of other things that are going into the production line. Up here, we got a boxcar, and it's carrying off the slop and the corn oil and everything to the market. And down here, we got a boxcar that's picking up spirits, alcohol that can be drunk. Another view of a distillery with the scales here, the rail track coming in, your grain going in here, into a dryer. then it's fermented and stuff. Just a little thing. We got some better pictures a little bit later on. Another view of now we got a covered hopper coming in, dropping the grain. This would be modern time. Grain going up, hitting the elevator, coming down to the cleaner, down to the elevator that takes it up, puts it in its various silos. It is pulled off. The various grains are put in proportions that you want your proportions in for the way you make your alcohol. It then goes over the cooker where you put your mash in. You know, the Colonel's famous recipe that's kept guarded and the Coca-Cola recipe that's kept guarded. Well, each distillery has its own mash that they keep guarded, and that's added into the cooker that gives it their taste to the bourbon. Bourbon must be aged in new charred barrels, as I just said, made of American white oak. We're running out of white oak, people. Go out there and plant some white oak. Here is your typical barrel. The bunghole where you put it in and take it out. Your barrel staves, your quarter hoops, and this. Now, when you fill this thing up and you put the bung in, the angels swoop down on this barrel and they start stealing the spirits out of here. And at the end of 4 years, if you're lucky, 80% of the alcohol that you put in will be left. The rest will have been stolen by the angels. That's evaporation. We call it the angels steal it. You get around a distillery here in Frankfurt, per se, and you're going to find everything covered with black mold. That's the alcohol coming off that the angels stole. Some people get upset with it. Doesn't bother me. And of course, when they go and make the bourbon in that, and there's an inversion of that. Oh, I love the smell. A lot of people hate the smell. Anyway, there is the side of a barrel house. A lot of the barrel houses will move these barrels every 6 months to a different level so that they're subject to different heat. Some don't, some just leave in place. Others move it around. Occasionally you'll see one of these barrels has been bought by somebody and it is their barrel and it'll be tapped and it'll be bottled in their bottle. And I need to say right up front that a lot of the quote craft distilleries in Kentucky don't distill. They buy their barrels from the big guys. I shouldn't tell you that, but truth. Angel steal bourbon from the barrel. I mentioned that. Here is your various things that come off of your tar as you're heating the alcohol. And what you're pulling off is your various whiskeys, neutral spirits, and then your absolute alcohol. That absolute alcohol was being sold during the COVID deal for washing your hands, except they put poison in it. Proof. This confuses people. 50 proof means that the alcohol within the bottle is 25% alcohol. 100 proof, 50% alcohol. 150 proof, 75%. 200 proof, 100% alcohol. How do we get proof? Proof supposedly goes back to the early 1800s. You were offered some alcohol and you wanted to make sure that it was good. So you took a pinch of gunpowder, put it in a spoon, poured some alcohol that you were offered on it, and lit a match to it. If it didn't burn very well, it was below 100 proof. If it went poof, it was burnt, I should say. It was good. If it went poof, it was over 100 proof. So you proved it to 100 proof. Okay. 80%, when you make whiskey in the distillery, it's 80 to 100% alcohol. You're going to add water to this later on to cut it to what level you want to cut to. Single batch, small batch, and blended. I'm going to talk about this a second. A single barrel is, of course, it came out of a single barrel. Small batch. Well, if you normally do 1,000 barrels of bourbon per day and you did 999 today, that's a small batch. Now, if you usually do 50 barrels per day and you did 49 today, that's a small batch. Understand? Small batch means it's less than what you normally do. Blended means you put more than one barrel in. A small batch is blended bourbon. You will see three types of bourbon sold: single barrel. There'll be a blended that's from select barrels, and then there'll just be general bourbon. That means they poured all the barrels in. Here it is, the dumping and mingling of your bourbons within. Here we are at a distillery. Notice we got a train over here on the side, our scale house. This is 1940s. The farmers come in with his wagon, with his donkeys loaded with grain. We got some trucks here with grain. And if you look up here, you can see the truck with the grain here being offloaded. Here is a boxcar with grain in it. Remember, there was a time when everything was shipped by boxcar, that the health of the country was determined by the number of boxcars that had been loaded during the week. This is why you hear this story about they fight the ideas of trailers on flat cars and containers, because it's destroying the boxcar count, because that was the way they kept check on the economy. Well, you had to build a new one. But you're filling the boxcar up with grain inside the grain door. Here's another picture, and you notice the grain is being fed out of the wagon into the hopper, carried up the conveyor, and blown through the pipe into the boxcar. Another one with the elevator and the grain being blown into the boxcar. We are inside the boxcar, and here's the grain being blown in. How'd you like this job? You're in there spreading the grain out so it's even over the length of the boxcar. Here is one of the grain doors, which was a new improvement over the grain doors you just saw, which were slats of wood. This was a solid sheet of cardboard that you put up, reinforced cardboard, that covered your door. Here is one of those doors with that reinforced cardboard on the door, and then your grain being blown over it. Notice it says Signature Grain Door on it. Here it is. He's putting in the wooden doors, the last of them, going up. And you realize at the end, you got to get up there and pull those things out to get the grain out. Whoops. It looks like we loaded this Chicago Northwestern boxcar a little bit too full with grain. It's split in half, and the bears and that are going to come out of the woods. 10, 15 years ago, I was out at Essex when the Isaac Walton was the Isaac Walton. And the Burlington Northern Santa Fe had dumped a bunch of grain hoppers over the hillside. And the bears were having a wild time. And the trains kept hitting bears, and I'm not being mean, the tree huggers were upset because bears were being killed, and they wanted the grain buried or removed. It was a mess. I don't know how they ever resolved the deal with the bears and the spilt grain. There's another one, the outside brace boxcar with the wooden slats to go in to build up the side of the boxcar. You modelers all take a note about this. I expect to see one of these on your next layout. Here it is. The car has come in. It's at the distillery. The grain is being unloaded and going up in the various silos. Now, 1-2% of all grain is non-grain. You hear every once about a grain silo exploding, and say the dust exploded, that's because dust gets in with the grain. Hey, you clean your desk at home, right? And 3 days later, there's dust on top of it. That's the same thing that's going on with grain. Here's the guy in the car, the box car, got an inside view of the slats, and he's pushing a telltale down through the grain to pull out a sample. It will be picked back to the laboratory. They will dump it out and they will examine it to see if the grain is the right type of grain of the right size and how much non-grain there is mixed in with the grain. Here we are pulling the grain out of the boxcar. Man, can't you just think why a covered hopper works better than this for pulling the grain out of the boxcar? I don't know whoever dreamt this up, but it's got to be a real nightmare moving these scoops around to get the grain out. And then I guess the bottom grain you push out like this by shovels. Here's another view of the grain coming out, being pushed down into the bin, where then there's an elevator that carries it off up into the various silos. So I expect to see on your layout a distillery. Okay, the L&N. These are the Kentucky counties. We have 120 counties, 120 districts. You notice that the L&N counties are red. That's where the L&N is running. That's the distilleries they serve. Trimble County here does not have a railroad, so it's actually being served by the L&N. Here are the counties that are served by the L&N with the number of distilleries within the county. Bourbon County, you know, has 12 distilleries. Let me tell you something about Kentucky. Did you know that in Christian County, you can buy spirits to drink? Can't do it in Bourbon County. Anyway, they just changed that in Bourbon County. Now you can buy spirits in Bourbon County. But this is the number of distilleries that were around in the 1950s. There's a great falling off in the number of the distilleries as bourbon and goes out of American life. It comes back into life today. But again, there's starting to be a drop off in the drinking of bourbon. Strange. Counties, the distilleries not served by the L&N, Anderson 13, Boyd, there was 22 distilleries in Kentucky that were not served by the L&N. Actually 21 because Trimble County, even though the L&N isn't there, it's the closest railroad. Bourbon, back to what I said before, at least 51% corn. The other grains must be wheat, rye, barley. Can only add water. Kentucky limestone water if you want good. It's got to be distilled to 160 proof. Stored in new oak barrels. The oak barrel must be charred. Must be aged for 4 years. And it can be sold no higher than 125 proof. If it's sold to higher than 125, it's not bourbon. Bourbon is sold generally between 90 proof and 120 proof. Generally, that's the range. 9 steps to making bourbon: milling, cooking, fermenting, distilling, barreling, aging, your selection. There are people who are hard, who got a very good taste, that take a sip of the bourbon, tell whether it's good or not, and spit it out. They're not allowed to drink it. There is a federal agent standing there to make sure they don't drink it. They're allowed to put it in their mouths, taste it, but they got to spit it out. Then they process it and they bottle it. These were distilleries operating in the central Kentucky area where I live. I'm in Frankfort, Kentucky, around Lexington, Kentucky. And these were the distilleries around here. This is a list of distilleries the L&N was serving right after Prohibition ended. A distillery. There is 4 types that you got to think about. There's the bourbon distillery that just distills. It may store itself. No, I mean, it just distills, sorry. You got another distillery that distills and stores. You got another distillery that bottles. And you got distilleries that store and bottle. And it's strange. Because we got, I can't think of the name of the distillery. They just distill the stuff, load it on tank trucks that take it a mile up the road and load it into large railroad tank trucks, which then take it over to Bardstown, where it's offloaded and put in barrels. Strange. We have another distillery here that just distills in storage, and then it loads it into tank trucks and takes it to a bottling plant. Okay. Here we are at another distillery out there. The L&N hopper is brought in coal, which is going in, and you got to remember that this is early 1950s, where electricity is not throughout Kentucky, and you got to generate your own electricity. Yes, we got the rural electric co-ops, the REA, Rural Electric Associations now throughout Kentucky. But I can tell you, take you to a couple little spots in Kentucky where they still ain't got electricity. I can take you to a whole bunch of spots where there's no cell phone coverage or GPS coverage within about 10 miles of here. This is a distillery outside of Frankfort in 1890. It's a Paul Sawyer painting. And if you don't know who Paul Sawyer is, he's one of the great painters of the 1890s, maybe. Aha, we're looking at the Old Crow. No, I take it back. This is the Old Crow Distillery. Yeah, Old Crow Distillery. And you can see the size of it, and notice the railroad coming in, and the railroad running by up here, and more cars up here. These are the warehouses for storing the alcohol in. This is the distillery for making the alcohol. So these are this, and this is the bottling plant in here. And this is Glens Creek, where supposedly they're drawing their water from. Another view of one of the distilleries up there. Once again, railroad coming, and your cars on the site, and your warehouses here. I was in emergency management. You have not lived until you've gone to a warehouse fire of a warehouse filled with spirits on fire. Maybe some of you guys are firemen. There is no flame. There is absolutely no flame. The heat is tremendous, but there is no visual flame because it's burning pure alcohol. It's one of the weirdest things you will ever see. You walk close to it, and man, you can feel the heat. But where's the flame? I don't know. You just leave it burn. Don't put water on it. Another distillery, once again with box cars in here. This is all pre-1950 pictures of distilleries. Another one with your L&N boxcar in, Old Crow Distillery. Now, Glen Creek Distillery. Okay, we're going to look at Old Taylor Distillery. It is now Castle and Key Distillery. These distilleries changed name every 10 to 20 years. It's got to be a tax deal. Anyway, another picture. This is the castle, the Castle and Key name. This is where their copper distillers were. This was the gatehouse entrance. We are looking in on the distillery, the railroad tracks running up. They were doing rebuilding during this period. Their warehouses going up. Another view back in. This warehouse at the very top, I hope it drops out, was the longest bourbon warehouse, the biggest bourbon warehouse in the world. Okay, back there. This is the spring at Castle and Key. There's the castle. That was a spring. It looks like a keyhole, right? Castle and Key. Let's go back. Let's see. Well, foo-fa. Why can't I get that to drop out? Okay, I pulled it down. There's that longest warehouse in the world up there at the top. This warehouse burnt and it's on the ground now. That's still there. There's our castle and Keys. That's the administrative center. This is parking lot for the visitors now. Oh, and down here is the train station. This was Tarleton on the L&N Railroad. It was a passenger train stop through 1932. Another view thereof. Another view of the distill. One more view back in. This garden is all there. Another view back in the garden with our railroad tracks, with our distillery back here. This is now a wedding venue and other types of things held here. Looking with the train station over here on the right and our spring here. I'm a member of the local VFW, and we used to have our annual picnic up here, and it was a great time. And then the old Taylor was closed for a number of years, and Castle and Key took it over, and no more free VFW coming up. They wanted money. Okay. Another view of the thing. I'm sorry. Here's a view of the spring water that they use on their bourbon. This was a bankers convention in 1933 or 34. They brought a trainload of bankers up here from Lexington, Kentucky, and they had a huge picnic here. And of course, I guess they all sampled bourbon. Another view of the distillery. Okay, we're now in the distill where they're breaking the corn and that down, heating it up. There's our copper distilleries. They must be of copper. You can expect they cost a heck of a lot of money. Our grain being sorted and weighed. The barrels fermenting. They put it in the grain in that with the water, and they've taken their secret mash and dropped it in to get it to ferment. And I like the smell that comes off. I think it's a nice smell. It gets very, very hot as it works. Another distills. Bringing it off and putting it in the barrels. Filling the barrels up and hammering your bung into it. The first barrel that they put in after Prohibition. You notice they're all management. They're in suits and they got their hats on, right? There's a view of the longest warehouse, but I want you to notice the rail for rolling the barrels in. All these little things, they have little railroads or tracks to roll the barrels on. There they are in storage. As I said, these will be constantly moved around within it so they reach different temperatures within the building. Another view within it, you got barrels being rolled out somewhere. They all have with them little barrel elevators to move them up and down on. We're in the bottling facility. Another view of the bottling facility. Notice it's coming in the bottles over here, here. And I assume this is the federal agent back here. Because when they bottle, there is a federal agent back in here from the Treasury Department to oversee that all the stuff goes in the bottles, all the bottles will get a tax label on it, and nobody walks out with anything. Once again, I'm assuming this is the federal agent. This back here is the foreman for the job, and this is the worker. Here's the boxes coming off, and he's checking the boxes to make sure that on the box here is a federal revenue tax stamp, and he's making sure it's on there. I worked at Wiedemann Brewery in Covington, Kentucky when I was in college, and we had 10,000 cans that we filled with beer, and a few of them began to bubble along the seam on the side. Wiedemann had already paid the tax on them to the federal government and the state of Indiana, which is where they were going. When it was shown that they were, and Wiedemann's wanted their money back, me and another guy for a week took an ice pick and punched every can got punched under the watchful eye of a federal revenue agent and an Indian state of Indiana agent to make sure that every can was destroyed. When we punched it, we threw it into a big compressor where it was compressed. Anyway, what a waste of beer. Anyway, on with the story. There's coming out down the conveyor out into the boxcar, and there it is being loaded on the boxcar for shipment. We are at Taylor. No, the picture is not backwards. That's the stencil to put Taylor onto the barrels. Here's another view of one of the distilleries. Some of them were very substantial places. Back to Castle and Key with this outside brazed boxcar there. Another distillery somewhere. Some warehouses are sheet metal and they just don't look neat. Another view of this Castle Key. Aha! This is now Buffalo Trace. Used to be Ancient Age. Used to be OFC. We'll talk about OFC later. The great automobile race with Tony Curtis and Natalie Wood. When Tony Curtis gets his car, this is the aerial shot they use. The railroad came in here, went back here, and cut across here, and this is where the grain was offloaded. And last year, they had 8 feet of water in here, courtesy of the Kentucky River. Another view of a distillery with an L&N car loaded with coal. Some more L&N boxcars at a distillery. We are at OFC distillery in Frankfurt with them rolling the barrels across. Now this is a streetcar line that came back into the distillery. And here we're rolling the barrels from one warehouse to another warehouse. And here's our streetcar line that came back in. It lasted till 1934, 1890 to 1934 when it went under. There's our OFC right there. OFC. See it on the barrel? We'll talk about that later. Explain to you what OFC stands for. Of course, these are the workers. This must be the foreman of these workers because he's got a hat on. These guys have caps on. And this guy must be from upper management because he's got a walking stick. I assume he's been in there pulling samples from the barrels to see if there's okay. It's a whiskey thief is what that's called, a whiskey thief. We're back into the a distillery, and they brought a trainload of people in. This was in the old days, who are getting off to sample some bourbon and such. You can still go and do that. This is obviously a posed picture of loading pepper onto a boxcar in L&N. Can you see where I got the guy's hand on this box and this box? Those are revenue stamps there on the side of the boxes. This box has a revenue stamp on it. Once again, I'm assuming this is the federal agent making sure that every box has a federal thing on it. This is the checker from the distillery, and these are the 4 workers. Obviously a posed picture, because how is this poor guy going to get out of the boxcar? And why aren't they just running the boxes out the walkway? Anyway, but I think it's an interesting picture to show loading a boxcar. This was the train station at Ancient Age, now Buffalo Trace. The railroad track came in from here, and it was serviced by the Frankfort and Cincinnati Railroad. Long gone, went out of business in 1985. Here's the barrels being rolled across. I think this is neat. This is their 1-barrel warehouse. And I think it's got, this is the 5 millionth barrel in here. I think that's what it is. Kentucky River's down here. Whatever becomes their next millionth barrel gets put in there and it ages. And it ages not for 4 years, but it ages until such time as the next millionth barrel is ready. Another distillery out in the Bardstown area with our railroad track coming in, the loading dock. Aha! A boxcar full of early times bourbon going to Las Vegas, Nevada. A bottle of Cedar Run whiskey. Cedar Run was over in Anderson County, just south of us. It was serviced by the Louisville Southern, later Southern Railroad. We are at the Frankfort Depot. This is all OFC. Bourbon going out in wooden cases. This, you got to remember, it's wooden cases in those days. It's not cardboard, it's wooden. Plus we got barrels there going. So that's why I said earlier we got wood coming in. By the way, the sidestep here. This is the other side of the street. This was all, what do you want to say? The sleazy district of Frankfort, the other side of the track. And once a month, the L&N pay train would come in here. And the wife would hope that the husband got his paycheck in cash and came this way and didn't go across the street and visit the bars and the girls. Another whole story if you want to talk about that sometime. Another distillery with our railroad track running in. A major distillery in Louisville with its train station and the train running by. Bardstown with the L&N servicing it. See the train back in here. By the way, none of the distilleries are serviced by the railroads anymore. They all lost the business to the trucking industry, except they do move the finished product, trailer on train and stack containers. Another view of a rail, one of the bigger distilleries in Louisville. Aha, Glenmore Distillery down in Owensboro, Kentucky. This was a very interesting distillery. It's still in existence. It was a neat distillery, one of its kind in the world, as far as I know. This is the L&N coming in. The L&N is swinging over here to the Owensboro Power House. Owensboro owns its own generating plant. Big story about that sometime if you want it. And this is the L&N going in the distillery. But on the distillery property, they had their own short line railroad, a narrow gauge railroad. Look at that. Isn't that neat? The name of the railroad was the Owensboro and Elsewhere Railroad, Colonel Glenmore's. And there's the 2 millionth bottle of bourbon being produced. I forget, it's gone through a number of hands, and I forget who owns it nowadays, but it's still in production. Unfortunately, the narrow gauge railroad is gone. But that was the neatest thing in the world. Another view of a distillery. Here is a calling card, the back side of a calling card. Okay, you all remember the movie The Music Man, and he's a drummer, right? And the drummers are on the car, and a drummer is a salesman who goes out in the hinterlands and calls upon stores. You just don't walk in unannounced. You send a card a week ahead of time saying that you are going to be there and have your order ready because I'll be ready there to pick it up. But this is the backside of one, a backside of another. Oops, I got little things out of order. Sorry. Buffalo Strings Distillery over at Stamping Ground, Kentucky. It's gone, but it was served by the Frankfurt and Cincinnati. Another view of Buffalo Springs. And one more. You'll see a couple ads for GE 45-ton locomotives. One ad, and it's sitting on this trestle back here. Old Pepper Distillery over in Lexington, Kentucky. It's closed. It is now a venue. There's bourbon tasting in there, but there's a very, very nice pizza place in this end here. This track is still on the road, and you can have beer here. Look at Towns Branch here, and right over here is the R.J. Corman Railroad Yard, former L&N Railroad Yard. And this is bourbon tasting back in here. Neat place, good bourbon. If you're in Lexington, Kentucky, and where the finger of the arrow is pointing is Rupp-Arena. 1899, a list of distilleries. Okay, go once again. Notice the license for 355 is at Bardstown, Kentucky. But we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people operating underneath that one license at Bardstown. So you have that a distillery may operate for more than one group. Buffalo Trace in Frankfurt also makes bourbon for 2 other labels. Let me put it that way. They make it for their own label, and they make it for 2 other labels. One of the other labels being Happy and Old Van Winkle. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Here are a bunch of distilleries that were in recent times around my hometown of Frankfurt. As you can see, there was a whole slew of them here. This is over in northern Bourbon County, where there was a slew. And this is Wild Turkey down here, and Four Roses here, LeBrow and Graham, Old Taylor, Old Crow, Spring Hill, Hermitage, Old Granddad, oops, Ancient Age, Kennebec, Famous Brands, and I forget who they were up there, and I forget those over there. Anyway, needless to say, there was a whole bunch of distilleries around there at one time. Here is a idea of Wild Turkey. They make Russell Reserve and Kentucky Spirit only for sale in the United States. They make for sale in the United States and export 80 proof, 101, which is really good, rare breed, which is good, rye, okay, terrible stuff, terrible. Wild Turkey honey, yuck. Personal opinion. My wife thinks it's good. I think it's yuck. For export only, they make 86 proof, 8-year-old and 12-year-old. I don't know why they don't sell the 12-year-old here. And they got 2 duty-free ones they make, Stampede and Freedom. Over here, of course, is Buffalo Trace. And as I come down here and I said, there's Old Rip Van Winkle, there's Pappy, Van Winkle Reserve. And if you haven't heard of Pappy, shame on you. You can go into a bar in Kentucky and most probably get a shot of Pappy for $100. You get a shot of Old Rip Van Winkle for $50. It is good stuff. Okay, 1950, Association of Alcohol Beverage Control Board makes rules on shipping of bottled spirits. As you know, everything in the United States is controlled by associations, and they set the size of the bottles on the shipping carts. A 50-foot boxcar can only load, under these rules, 5 boxes high and 4 boxes high. It was called a 4-on-5 load. Here's a 4-on-5 load, the 4 load going in. Aha! But trucks could carry a 5-on-5 load. So the trucks began to suck up all the bourbon business. In 1968, the Chesapeake and Ohio, don't ask me why the Chesapeake and Ohio does, orders 50 Pullman Standard 1 boxcars. They can carry a 5-on-5 load. These boxcars are pooled with the L&N. There's got to be a reason why the L&N do it, because the L&N's got all the distilleries. The C&O's just got a couple. Why is the C&O doing it? Buried somewhere in the paperwork's got to be a story. There's the C&O. There's one of those 50 boxcars. Return to Cliffside, Kentucky, the L&N. Got a better view of that back here. Another view. You modelers taking notes on this? You're going to build one of these? Run it on your railroad? Okay, there it is. When empty, return to L&N Railroad, Cliffside, Kentucky. That's here in Frankfort, Cliffside is. That was the spur that led out to Old Taylor and Old Crow Distillery. Spring Hill was there. Nearby was Old Granddad, Kennebec. There was 5 or 6 distilleries right around here. Here's another view of that boxcar. A diagram thereof. I tried to talk the C&O-HS into making one of these. I thought it would be a great thing to make, one of a kind thing. But the powers that be didn't think it was a great idea. I still think it was a great idea. There's an interior of it. with its folding doors. There is the folding doors to lock the boxes in place. A gentleman standing there from management showing the 5-on-5 load. This is just some of the bourbons that used to be made here in Kentucky. Gone. These are gone. Aha, now we're back to OFC. And all y'all been wondering what OFC stands for. Well, I will tell you, it stands for Only for Catholics. Well, that's the joke here in town. Because most of the people that worked there were members of the Good Shepherd Parish, which was a Catholic parish, because the our Protestant denomination weren't too thrilled about it. We're anti that. It actually stands for Old Firestone Copper, which was the official name. Old Firestone Copper, was known as Only for Catholics. Joke, joke. Anyway, here's the old Oscar Pepper Distillery. I put this in because you can see they're feeding cattle with the slop. It's coming off, feeding the cattle, which gave you really premium lean cattle that you really wanted. Aha, back to one of these we'll call soon cards. Fine whiskey. Oh, isn't that a beautiful young lady? Our Mr. H.T. Stagger will take pleasure in calling on you about, it's not filled in, and will treat you kindly, reserve your orders, and it's the NM Uray and Company Incorporated of Louisville, a distillery. If nothing unfortunately occurs, I'll drop by you very soon. Save this piece. It's for the Benjamin Distillery Company of Louisville. And once again, he's dropping by to pick up your order for bourbon. And things that make Kentucky famous. Fast horses and fast women and pretty horses. I had to get that right. Fast women and pretty horses. And remember, Jack Daniels is just Tennessee slop, while Kentucky bourbon is the nectar of the gods. And there are barrels being rolled. And I thank you for putting up with me.
A very good program, Giles, and I think Dave Brown's got a couple questions for you.
Yeah, want me to just say them? So I was curious as to how the slop was packaged for shipment.
It is dried out and it is just put in sacks. It's I want to call it dog food type sacks and stuff like that. They used to give it away free, and then somebody got smart and said, "Hey, this is worth money," and they began to sell it.
Okay.
Old Rip Van Winkle, in case you're wondering what it looks like.
You had one slide that said 160% alcohol, and trust me, that's not possible.
Yeah,
Should read 160 proof, probably.
no, there is 100% alcohol. You can buy it. It's Red Dog.
No, but your slide said 160%, which is mathematically impossible.
Okay, that sounds should have said 160 proof.
Okay, yeah. You might want to go back and fix that.
Okay, I'll go back and look at it.
Anyway, I got to admit, this is one of the most interesting railroad programs I've ever seen. It's as someone who enjoys bourbon, this was great. I'm not sure how much it had to do with railroads in the end, but this was a fabulous program.
Thank you.
You'll be hearing from me.
Okay.
I'll get you his email, Dave. Anybody else who got any other questions? Anybody in Richmond?
So, why was the the bourbon industry concentrated in Kentucky. I would think you had corn and water almost anywhere, but
I couldn't hear.
uh,
Don, I think you just got to speak up a little bit louder.
Charles, yeah, I was wondering, why was the bourbon industry all concentrated in Kentucky, since water and corn would be pretty available almost anywhere?
Well, we have all kind of tours in Kentucky of the distilleries. They are getting a little expensive, except Buffalo Trace in Frankfurt is free. So if you come to Kentucky and you want to take a tour, the Buffalo Trace is free. And you want to get yourself, while you're in Kentucky, some Rebecca Ruth bourbon candy. It has got so much bourbon in it that the US government will not allow you to mail it.
Well, Tom, I mean, is bourbon made anywhere else besides
Yeah,
Kentucky?
it is not coming through, sir. I just cannot hear you.
But
Well,
he's wondering if the bourbon is made any else besides Kentucky.
Once again, it keeps breaking up. He wants to know what about bourbon?
He wants to know if bourbon's made anywhere else besides Kentucky.
Some stupid people over in Virginia claim they make bourbon, and some stupid people in California claim they make bourbon. But those are stupid people. And bourbon can only be made in Kentucky. You may call it other things, but it's not bourbon. You know, it's just like, and you know, what I really get upset with is I was flying on an airplane a year ago, and I asked for some bourbon, and they gave me some Jack Daniels, and I said, "This is sorry, should say things like this. This is Tennessee slop," and threw it back to her. I said, "I want bourbon." Another bourbon I like, in case you're interested, is Knob Creek single barrel, 9 years old, 120 proof. That is good stuff, sir.
All right, at the risk of embarrassing myself, what's your opinion of Bullet?
I like it. I won't turn it down. I won't go out
Okay.
of my way to buy it. And there is a bottle of it sitting across the room if I were to go over and get it. It was
Okay.
given to me as a Christmas present. And what, we're 6 months in for Christmas, and I still haven't opened it.
Okay, well, I feel somewhat vindicated in having sipped it during your program.
Okay. Now I'm going to offer you guys something if you ever want it. I got a program on moving a milk can from central Kentucky to Cincinnati, Ohio, from the producer of the milk to the tri-state dairy in Cincinnati, where they turn it into a product for sale. But if you don't want me back, my feelings will not be hurt. Seeing the picture in back of the silent monoliths,
Yes,
I assume people got the latest issue of the NRHS bulletin. And,
oh my God, yes, it's sitting here on my desk.
okay,
But we had actually reached out to Jeff sometime before we knew that this was going to be coming out in the NRHS bulletin.
well, we got 4 tars. The one is on the front of the pictures at Irvington. We got one at Owensboro. We got one at Lebanon Junction, and one at Lexington, Kentucky.
And they're all in Jeff's book?
I don't know. I haven't gotten the book yet.
Oh, okay. Well, now it's time for me to put in my pitch for our program tomorrow night, which is in the background of my screen. Go to our website and click on the meetings tab and you'll find a link to the Zoom for the program. It's a Zoom webinar, and you're most welcome to Zoom in.
Okay, I will see if I can do that tomorrow.
That would be great. Would love to see you. This was just fabulous, I gotta say.
If you could be kind enough to send me the link, it must probably work easier for me.
Oh, I can do that, but I don't have your email address, so.
Somebody must have it since they sent me this link tonight.
Okay, but the link to the program, you can just go to the website, which is behind me there,
Oh, the mass, but they,
rre.org, and then click on the meetings tab. And the link will be right there. It's open to everyone.
okay, I wrote that down.
Good. Hope to see you tomorrow night.
Okay.
With that being said, did anybody get any more questions?
Alan, thank you. Thank you for arranging this. This was fabulous.
Yeah, okay. Any more questions, for Charles? All right, we'll see you guys again next month.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you guys for having me.